podcast where we unlock the secret to amazing you, mind, body, and soul. I'm Dr. Jaye. I'm your host. I'm your cheerleader. I'm your guide as we navigate the fascinating world of women's health and well-being in the season of this podcast. Now, if you're ready to laugh, if you're ready to learn, and if you're ready to take charge of your health, you've come to the right place. And my mission here is simple. I want to empower you, yes, you, that incredible woman, and also men listening. I want to empower you to live your fullest, healthiest life. And I strongly believe that when women thrive, entire communities thrive. And that's my vision. My vision is to create a ripple effect of well being where every episode of this podcast leaves you with something practical, something uplifting, and definitely something that makes you say, wow, I can do that. So, welcome, welcome, welcome. And now you can see on my screen, there is somebody here. I have a very special guest. I will leave him to introduce himself, but Dr. Dushoga is a very experienced gynecologist. He currently works in Canada, so it is a huge honor and a huge privilege for me to be speaking to him here in the UK. And I appreciate all the effort he has made to turn up today. Thank you so much, Dr. Dushaga.
Thank
And
you.
today we will be talking about hysterectomy, fibroids, and early menopause, what every woman should know. So, Dr. Dushaga, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I'm going to start by asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit. Tell us what actually drew you to gynecology, because most of us think it's a women's field, but you are a man. So tell us a
Okay.
little bit about yourself.
Okay. Thank you very much for having me. I'm Fumi. People call me Fumi. Banco de Sugar. That's the name I coined for myself, just for ease of pronunciation. I'm a UK trained gynecologist and obstetrician, and my special interest has always been laparoscopic surgery, which is keel surgery, as you call it in the UK. But in Canada, it's known as laparoscopic surgery. Nobody knows what keel means. Each time I tell them keel,
Really?
they think it's bizarre. You mean key? You have to have a key to open your tummy or something.
Yes, it
So
is keyhole, please. Let's leave it as keyhole, yeah.
yeah, so it's called laparoscopic surgery, and it's
Mm,
interesting because the patients do know what laparoscopy means in Canada. Obviously, I'm UK trained. I've been here for the past 18 years or so, and I only moved to Canada a year and a few months ago just because I just wanted a break from the retinue and hard work in the UK. I needed
what
a.
do you mean? UK? What do you mean when you say hard work in the UK?
Yeah, it's pretty hard, and I was working really hard. I keep telling people
Mm.
I had four secretaries. I was working in four different hospitals. I was an NHS consultant. I was operating 4 days a week, and at the point I realized that I needed
Mm.
a self-imposed sabbatical just to recalibrate.
That
And
sounds
yeah, I'm
that
in
sounds like
Canada.
a recipe for burnout, isn't it?
I don't know, but my generation doesn't do burnout, I suppose. Yeah. So I'm
Mm,
from that generation where you just keep working and working and working, and I mean, work is like
mm,
fun, right? But at
mm.
the same time, you have to have enough sense to know when to recalibrate and so you can divert your energy to the right sports and be more
Mm,
efficient. Yeah.
mm,
So how did I get into gynecology? I think I didn't choose gynecology; it chose me. I got to the UK in 2005, wanted to be a pediatrician, couldn't get a job as a pediatrician, and somebody offered me, "Would you do obs and gyne?" I said, "Well, anything to pay the bills," and I went for it. And the first 3 years, I was just doing it as a job until I got to my, I think, second or third year, and my trainer then told me to do a procedure, was training me to watch me doing a procedure, and I did it, and she said, that's the very first time, and she's been a consultant for many years, I will see a trainee do it at one go so slickly. I said, you
mm,
might want to think about laparoscopic surgery. And that was the
mm,
light bulb moment for me. And And also, I think something else happened a year or so into my training. I tried applying for jobs, and the person who was supposed to be um, my referee gave me a 1.5 page reference and said,
Mm.
"This guy, I don't know what it will be like in another specialty, but this guy is just a good. It's got the potential." So
You
I
were
guess
naturally talented
I
in
think I
that
think I
area.
think so. I think so. I think so. I think it's sometimes in life other people see what you can't see.
That's true.
Yeah, and
Mm, mm,
it's sometimes hard to fight. Your
mm,
chosen path, and I think for me
mm,
it's a chosen path because I remember when I was in medical school, I was walking down the corridor during my obs and gynae posting. And I
mm.
remember saying to myself, I will never be found doing this, never ever in my life. And I remember
And
hearing, and I remember hearing a voice saying, "Never say never."
mm,
And I still remember that day and that spot. I actually
that's
went to my uni
interesting.
last year to walk on that same corridor to say,
Wow.
I remember when I said I will never be caught doing this.
That is interesting. And how life has just turned round and come
Absolutely.
round to that very point again.
And
That's amazing.
dare I say, when we were doing when we trained as gynecologists, when we trained as trainees, it used to be a ratio of like 8 men to 2 women. But
Okay.
by the time I got to my last year, it was now like, you know, 8 women to 2 men.
That's interesting because recently the General Medical Council here in the United Kingdom have come up with some data showing that we have more women on the register of doctors compared to men. And I find find that really, really intriguing that more and more women are getting into the profession to be doctors.
And I think it's a fantastic thing, yeah, that you have more women.
Mm,
I think women are naturally instinctively caring,
mm,
and
mm.
I would say definitely it's a good thing that you have more women. But there was a time we used to joke about the feminization of obs and gynae, but I don't know in those days. But
Yes.
and I think it was good the UK sort of make the training flexible so you can have more women representation. It brings a different angle to it altogether,
It
and
does. It does.
I'm happy about that.
And that's one reason I'm quite passionate about women because I believe that, more and more women are doing so many things that maybe generations, maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago, would never have dreamt of doing. But at the same time, they are getting to midlife, and many of them are just kind of I don't know, it's not all of them, but more and more you hear all the negative stories about menopause, and that's why I tend to want to look at midlife as actually an empowering time after all these years of training. And then you get to the middle of your life where you really bring your experience to the core and train other people, and then you find out actually what's going on here. Now that will lead me to my next question, actually, for me. Now, what when we talk about women, obviously we've talked about women as doctors. Now I'm talking about women as patients. What's one thing you wish more women knew about their post reproductive health? And when I say post reproductive health, that is their health after they've given birth to babies, after they've given birth to children, and their children are probably teenagers or whatever, and they're right in the middle of life. What's one thing you wish women knew about their post reproductive health?
That's an interesting question. And I think one thing that I find not just about women, especially women around that time, is just to know that they're not alone,
Mm,
right?
mm,
It's not whatever they're going through is not peculiar to them.
mm,
And they're not mad because many of
mm,
them come to you and say, I think I'm running mad. Even things like even things like prolapse,
mm,
um, some literature do say if you've gone through the birth process, about 60% of women, about 60% of women that have prolapse don't even know they've got prolapse.
that's true.
Yeah, it's only some that are symptomatic that come. So when you see women with prolapse, they come really shrouded with fear, and you have
Mm,
to sort of, allay their fears that you're not alone. And
mm,
I mean, there's a quote that says "Mystery loves company," but that's not what
yes.
we're saying. But the
Mm,
fact that you're not alone, you're not the only one going through, you're not berserk, sort of
mm,
gives them a little bit of, uh,
confidence.
confidence that look, and also to know that there more often than not, there are solutions to every problem, every
Mm,
concern you have. Now,
mm,
your concern might take a touches journey, it might be a journey until we get to the point where we can manage it.
yeah,
But there is light at the end of the tunnel. There's definitely light at the end of the
there
tunnel.
is light.
I see women coming many years after suffering,
Mm,
sometimes because around that time in your life, maybe you're top of your career, a lot of people depend on you, your teenagers depend on your husband sometimes actually has become a child now, is going to midlife crisis. So because
Caring responsibilities. Let's leave it
abs-
as well.
absolutely. And
Mm,
around that time, women tend to sort of neglect themselves. They put themselves at the back of
mm,
the queue.
mm.
So it's just to say, think about yourself. If you're healthy, your community becomes pretty healthy as well.
That's
So it's
amazing.
just say you're not alone. There's light at the end of the tunnel. Most
Mm.
conditions have a solution.
Absolutely. But the problem is that when some women come to discuss their problems or some of them feel dismissed, and I have a lady I work with who assists me when I'm doing kind of procedures like prolapse, when I'm putting pessaries in. And she was telling me about her story as a younger woman. She's retired now. She's a retired nurse, but she assists me with my procedures. And she said, even as a younger woman, she found it really difficult to talk to doctors about her gynae problems, and she just suffered in silence for so long. But the other issue is that sometimes some women feel like they are dismissed when they are talking about it. What do you think? How can women have better conversations and advocate for themselves generally when they come to see a doctor?
I would say thank you for that. That's a very important question, and I see a lot of women, saying that they've been trying to talk to doctors about this, or those who've they've spoken with other doctors in the past, and they felt dismissed. And you can't sort of run away from the fact that that's definitely true. I think one has got to do with going back to doctors. Doctors have to get retrained and be more cognizant of the fact that that's what our clients are saying, and they can't be wrong because they are clients. Their
Mm,
customers always come first.
mm,
um, what I would say, what I think really helps is that when you go in for your consultation, before you see the doctor, be prepared.
mm.
Right. Most doctors, there's so much brevity in the time the ones they're going to see you and they're under pressure. I remember when I used to do my clinic here, as soon as I left my clinic, I was dashing straight to theater. So time
There's
is
a
really
lot of
precious.
time
Yeah.
pressure.
Pressure,
Mm,
yeah. So if you write down your question, right, and we used to do that in the past where you gave the doctor saw your question before you got into the room, that helps. But more
mm,
importantly, if you go into the consultation with an advocate, it
mm,
makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of difference. So
mm.
if your advocate, sometimes your advocate might be your husband,
Mm,
and sometimes your advocate might be your mom or your
that's
friend,
true.
or so what happens is that when people come into the consultation room, most times, more often than not, the doctors actually addressed their concern, but
Mm.
because they shrouded, there's a psychological, what do you call it, atmosphere
Secrecy. Mm,
atmosphere that doesn't make you absorb all the doctor is saying.
mm.
So a lot of times patient might complain, I told him this, he never mentioned anything about it. But you look at the doctor's notes and he's actually mentioned it. But he
Mm,
might have used medical jargons.
mm,
It might have
mm,
been too fast. And
mm.
people don't like saying, I don't understand what you're saying,
That's
right? Because
true.
it makes them feel, maybe they feel a bit, they don't want to feel stupid, basically.
That's
So, but if
true.
you have an advocate, there's sometimes they will say, Doctor, I don't think she understands what you're saying.
That's
Sometimes
true.
the advocate writes for you,
Yes.
and I think it's a bipartisan, what do you call it, approach. There must be a bipartisan approach from the
Mm,
medical side, from the patient
mm,
side. You come in prepared, but come with an advocate. Some of the
mm.
things you missed, your friend or your mom or your husband would remember. And
That's
as
true.
doctors, we've got to make sure
Mm,
that our patients do understand. And I take the pains to ask my patient, do you really understand? Can I go over it again?
that's very
Now, the
important.
the UK has done something really. I think it was last 3 years, where there was a change in the way, I think the GMC advised that rather
Mm,
than writing people's GPs,
that's true.
you
Right
write
to the
the
patient.
patient. You
That's
write,
true.
and I think that would solve a lot of
Mm,
problems. So I would say, first, be prepared.
yeah.
Two, get an advocate.
Yeah.
Probably the third thing, right, which I it's my style when I consult, when I see my patients, my women,
Yeah.
I do ask them, what's the number one thing you want me to solve today? So I
Mm,
always have a scale of symptoms. I have a
mm,
scale that where your symptoms are scaled according to how severe they are.
yes.
So you have the most difficult one. So if you can, some patients, if I just get this bleeding problem away, you're giving
Mm,
back my life. They might have a
mm.
retinue, a
Of other
plethora of
issues.
complaints, but there
Mm.
might be two things. Just get this done. I'll be happy.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for that. So I appreciate the fact that you said, coming with an advocate because I have seen that happen so much. In fact, I remember one of my patients who came in with her son, and it wasn't for anything, but it was just more of a support. Sometimes when they come in that way, we usually ask whoever they've come in to maybe step outside so that we can examine them fully. But at least for that part of that conversation, I think most women would actually find it helpful bringing in somebody in with them into the consultation room.
You're absolutely right because most times you're meeting a stranger the first time. There's no that doctor-patient relationship takes a while to build. It's a
That's
bit
true.
different if you've seen a GP. Your GP
Correct.
knows you, but
Mm,
and in those days GPs were family doctors. They went to your house. They knew everyone.
yeah.
But you've seen someone who looks. You never met this person before. You might not. He has an accent. So there are a lot of
Correct.
nuances that you got to put into
Mm,
place
mm.
whilst dealing with people.
That is so useful. So, women, write your questions down before you go to see your doctor. And if you're not too sure, maybe go in with somebody. Okay. Now, I want to talk about some very important problems many women face in midlife. And this is heavy bleeding. Um, some women already know why. They know they have fibroids. Other women may not know why. Other women, it might just be the hormonal time, when they reach 40. And I say this to most women I see in my practice. Once you reach the age of 40, your periods are going to change. So be prepared. But first of all, why are these issues so common in perimenopause? And do they always need surgery? Because I find that a lot of women, especially in some countries of the world, which we both know, end up having surgeries. They have their womb taken out. But do they always require surgery? I know there's two questions in one, but I just love listening to you for me. So please feel free to explain where you can.
Okay, like you said, you mentioned it. Thanks, very good question. The perimenopausal time is a very interesting time because your hormones are very erratic. They're everywhere. And as a result, because your hormones are erratic, today you can have a surge in one of the hormones. The body is actually trying to sort of get to the end stage. The ovaries are trying to say, I've done my job, produce hormones for you to produce eggs. You've had babies. Now I'm on my way out. It's like the end of a relationship. And like a
Mm,
very, like every end of relationship is usually chaotic. So
mm,
it's a very unpredictable time. You might have a very period today, then you don't see a period for 2 months. Then it's almost like if you have somebody who's been in a relationship with you for many years, about 40 years, or 30 years, and you've known each other, they have a cup of tea with you, the day, at a particular day of the month, and you have like dates on those day of the month for 4 days, 5 days, then they start behaving funny. They become very needy. They come more than 4 days a week, or
mm,
sometimes they don't even come at all.
mm.
It doesn't just impact you physically, it impacts you psychologically.
It
It's
does.
for women to know that it's the end, and things are going to be erratic. So that's
Mm,
why, just because of the um, unpredictable nature of the way you produce hormones, because your ovaries are beginning to, your ovarian reserve is getting poorer. That's one.
mm,
And it's just knowing that that's going to happen. Like like you said, you already speak with your patient at 40. So that's what would help the expectation. And once your expectation is well managed, your symptoms will be well managed. at least psychologically. You know you're not running mad. You know you're not got. It's not. You don't necessarily have cancer. Half of the time when I see patients, I say, "What's the problem here?" Someone say, "I just want to know I don't have cancer." That,
Mm.
yeah. And most times, if you take a biopsy, okay, I know I'm not alone. It's not cancer. Doctor, I offer them hormones just to stabilize the period. And someone, the doctor, I just want to know I don't have cancer. That's fine. Are you sure I don't have cancer? Fine. And sometimes they're rarely, the guideline says if someone's obese and more than 45, do a biopsy. I
Mm.
sometimes will do a biopsy the 40-year-old, 40,
Mm.
just to
Mm.
let her know that you've not got a cancer
For
and to reassure her,
reassurance,
for
isn't
reassurance. Yeah.
it? Mm.
So that's one. Then surgery. In some countries where they've not got the options that we have in the West, surgery might be the only option they have.
Mm.
And based on the fact that those women might be going, a lot of things depend on them, and they can go through the stepwise management
Process.
care plan. So you just want to
Mm.
have it done and move on with your life. So some people just say, just get this thing out. And there's also a myth as well. Some people say, my grandmother had surgery for hysterectomy, my mom had surgery, then I should have surgery as well.
Mm.
Both things have changed with the advent of technology
Mm.
in gynecology and surgery.
Mm.
The options are just so numerous that you can
Mm.
choose. You can decide not to go for surgery. You can try other things.
Other
Now,
things like what, Doctor, for me?
I have a mantra. I'll come to that. Where
Mm.
I'll say surgery itself is barbaric. If you can solve every problem with a pill,
Mm.
yeah, then you should go for that.
Mm.
My approach is always to go the least invasive way of managing cases. So if a woman comes in and she's having heavy period, you could basically do a hysteroscopy, put a camera in the womb. It might just be a polyp.
Mm.
And taking out that polyp might help reducing the period,
That's interesting.
stabilizing the period. Other
Mm.
times, all they need is just what we call an ablation.
Mm.
Basically, you use radio frequency energy to heat up the line of the womb, to
Yeah.
burn it,
Yes.
and it will destroy, because they're not going to have children again, so it will just
Mm.
destroy the line of the womb.
Mm.
It's a 90-second procedure.
Wow, is that
Yeah,
quick? So less
is
than
that
two
quick?
minutes.
Less than 2 minutes.
And that could
So
save a lifetime of
of
bleeding
having
so
a
heavily,
hysterectomy, yeah.
or even having a
Obviously,
hysterectomy. Mm.
obviously, you need to investigate the womb to know the
Mm.
cause of the everything, to be
Mm.
sure it's not cancer.
Mm.
Once you know it's not cancer and she's finished having the children, and she's got a formidable form of contraception, you
Mm.
can actually, if she's not going to have children again, you can actually take out the tubes, because in taking out the tubes, it's minimal invasively done. It's a day procedure, and you
Mm.
can do radio frequency ablation of the womb, right?
Mm.
And in taking out the tubes, you also help in reduces the risk of cancer, because 50% of epithelial ovarian cancer starts from the tube. So you could
Right.
take that out and just do a little bit of an ablation, takes 90 seconds, and they go home the
Right.
same day with painkillers.
Right. Now that brings me to the next question.
So
And
sorry, I've not finished it.
you've
Loads
not
of
finished the previous
There are loads
answer.
of other. So you could use a Marina. I think the Marina is probably, it's not suitable for everyone, but the
Yes.
Marina coil is probably the best device in
Mm.
gynecology. It's reduced the hysterectomy rate drastically, to the point that there was a time there was nobody to operate on. There were few people to operate on. It was difficult to train people on how to on operating.
That's
Yeah,
so interesting.
yeah.
So
The
that
challenge with the Marina is it's not
yeah.
suitable for anyone. It's a
Mm.
mono, and
Mm.
in some cases it falls out. In some cases it gets dislodged. But in most cases, 7 to 8 out of 10 women, it just solves your problem, and it's protective against cancer of the womb,
Mm.
right? And you can use it as a form of HRT as well.
That's true.
So,
That's
and
true.
it's also a form of formidable contraception.
Yes. So it's
So,
like an
so
all-in-one. It's got so
it's the
many
only one.
functions.
Exactly. So if it works for you, it works perfectly. With fibroid, these days, you can take a fibroid minimally invasively with laparoscopic surgery or keyhole surgery.
Mm.
If the physician has the right skills,
Mm-hmm.
then these days there's a new technique called radiofrequency ablation of fibroid, where
Really?
where you can use radiofrequency to
Yeah.
reduce the size of fibroids. And even then, you can also move on to doing uterine artery embolization, where you put blood, where you plug the blood vessels that supplies the fibroid. So there
Mm.
are options. But obviously, these options are only available in advanced countries.
That's true.
They're not
But
readily
one
available.
would think that with, for example, the ablation that you mentioned, what that can be done within 90 seconds, it sounds like something that is quite easy to access. I'm not too sure, but is there does it require a lot of equipment? Or is it because it's expensive? I'm not too sure. Why would that be difficult for people to access in other countries?
So, I mean, I'll say the popular one is the NovoSure ablation. There's a balloon ablation, which should be cheaper, which you just put a bit of glucose in a balloon and you eat it up. And but that's been fashioned out. The one you have is a radio frequency ablation, and I think the last time I checked, a kit cost about £400.
Okay. Hmm.
If you look at it, if you do the cost effectiveness over the years,
Yes,
and looking at how it helps people go back to work early and how
it
they become
does.
productive, then it's worth it. But £400 in a place like Nigeria is a
Low
lot of money.
income countries, yes.
It's a lot of
It's a lot
money.
of money.
Yeah.
Well, yes, I think that's where we are hoping our government will invest more into health. And I know there's a lot of private work going on in Nigeria. Whether or not, when you look at the frequency or the amount of hysterectomies they do, and then you look at this procedure, hopefully people become a bit more aware and they can ask questions as well. And that's why I bring specialists like you to talk to us about what is actually the current trend, so people are just aware of it and they can talk and ask questions when they go to see their specialists. Now, you talked about the procedures, removing the fallopian tube, the embolization, and all the various procedures, hysterectomy. Now, there are the various schools of thoughts about it and the impact this has on triggering early menopause. And I don't know, what are your thoughts? Can you actually break that down? What actually happens when people have had hysterectomies, even though their ovaries are still intact and left behind? Why is it that they experience menopause symptoms early? Or is it just a myth?
Okay. Thanks for that excellent question. Now, I would like to start with the fact that no one should do a hysterectomy except it's totally necessary.
Mm,
And more often than not, if I were to do a hysterectomy, it's because the benefit outweighs the risk.
mm,
It's because you've reached the end of the road.
mm,
So ideally, that's what should be the case. Even in cases of fibroids, the fibroid is asymptomatic because 99% of fibroids are not cancerous. They're benign. It's a benign
true.
tumor, right?
Mm,
It's only in very few cases, very, very few cases, less than 1%, less than 0.5%, even less than 0. Really, really low number of cases would you have cases of leiomyosarcoma, which is cancer
mm,
of the fibroid. So, like I said earlier, your your mantra as a gynecologist to be only to do a hysterectomy except is essential,
mm,
only when it's essential. And I always say that a good surgeon knows how to do an operation.
mm,
A better surgeon knows when to do an operation. And
mm.
the best surgeons know when not to do an operation.
When not to do an
To an
operation, that
operation,
is
yeah.
deep. Mm,
Because it comes with concomitant risk,
mm,
bleeding, infection, damage to the bowel, bladder, ureters. Albeit they're pretty small, but if it happens in one person, that person is 100%. So
mm,
I normally try to explore the least invasive way to start with before moving on to doing anything invasive. But if
mm,
you were to do any hysterectomy, it's because the patient needs it. And
mm,
if they're younger, I would say if they're less than 44,
mm,
45, 45 below, then you have to sort of counsel them carefully, right? Should I leave your ovaries or should I take them out?
mm,
The only reason why you're thinking of taking the ovaries is because, for instance, if they say something like, I've been having recurrent ovarian cyst
mm,
and I have a family history of ovarian cancer,
mm.
and it's a strong family history of ovarian cancer, if they got the BRCA gene,
Yeah.
then you may well offer them. It's an offer, right? And if they were to say no, you have to support that. And
Mm,
if you were to take out somebody's ovaries, you need to make sure you give them HRT to the natural age of menopause. Otherwise, it affects their bone health, as you know, cardiovascular.
Yeah.
cognition and all that.
Mm.
So now, what happens when you're doing a hysterectomy? You're basically taking the womb out
Yeah.
and leaving the ovaries in when you're conserving the ovaries.
Yes.
Then don't forget the ovary is supplied by blood vessels by the ovarian vessels, but
Mm.
some part of the ovary is supplied by the uterine artery that supplies the uterus as well. So
Right.
in severing the uterus, leaving the ovaries behind, you inadvertently take away some of the blood supply of the ovaries. So
Wow.
it depletes the ovarian reserve ever so slightly. So
Mm.
whereas a woman who's had no hysterectomy, who's not been hysterectomized, would get into menopause most times around 51.
Mm.
Somebody who's had a hysterectomy with conservation of ovaries
Mm.
might notice that they get into menopause a bit earlier, 2 years or a year earlier.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
Mm.
And the caveat is always just to warn the ladies to say,
Mm.
look, this might happen.
Mm.
And if it happens, you can move on to HRT. You can use
Mm.
HRT if it's not contraindicated. There's some cases where you can give HRT rarely, but if
Mm.
it's not contraindicated, you can go straight to HRT.
Wow, that is deep. And that is one thing I'm not too sure women are being cancelled about when they have hysterectomies, because most of them just come back to tell me, oh no, I've just had a hysterectomy, and my ovaries have been left behind. But I don't think they realize that yes, some the part of the surgery can actually affect the way their ovaries work. But one of the interesting things, I think, when we were talking about this particular issue a while back, one of the interesting comments you made was that also some women actually, because of the degree of their symptoms leading up to their surgery, may actually be experiencing the symptoms of menopause at least maybe even earlier than they should, probably due to the stress because we, that
Yeah,
kind of an
you're pretty right.
investment.
Let's not forget that the people that need hysterectomy are usually in most times, not all the time, are usually in their mid 40s, perimenopausal. So they already have
Yes.
some of the symptoms.
Yes.
And just by taking the uterus out, it just makes magnifies the symptom,
It
right?
does.
And to be honest with you, sometimes people having their ovaries, one of the reasons why some women we choose in the last 10 years or so, 5, 10 years, we now know that even if you leave, even postmenopausally, your ovaries still releases a little bit of hormone,
Mm,
testosterone,
it
estrogen
does.
as well.
Mm,
And in some women, even though they've gone through menopause, when you take out their ovaries, they might be feeling the symptom of menopause prior to that, but it becomes more pronounced.
mm.
Now I've seen women, I've heard of women complain that I've never been the same since you took out my ovaries, despite the fact that they were menopausal when you
It,
did it.
that's interesting.
Yeah, yeah, because your ovaries still produce a little bit of
Little bit of
hormone,
hormone.
very
Mm,
tiny amounts of hormone,
mm,
even during menopause. So
mm,
these days, you have to counsel a woman, and make let her make an informed decision.
mm,
And I've had women who are well read about this, and they're 52, they need a hysterectomy for all this stuff, and say, just leave my ovaries alone.
mm,
You always counsel them to take out the tubes because in taking out your fallopian tube you're reducing the risk of ovarian cancer. Now, why gynecologists seem to push, they don't push, but offer um, ovarian removal,
yeah,
especially for people who are closer to menopause, because ovarian cancer is a horrible disease,
it is.
and more often than not, when you pick it up, by the time you have a symptom, you're already in stage 3.
Mm,
So that's why, because they've seen it.
yeah,
That's why they say, do you want us to take out your ovaries? Because they know that when they take that out, they reduce your risk of ovarian cancer ever so
ovarian cancer.
drastically. But
Mm.
obviously, and there's no formidable screening for ovarian cancer.
Yes, I know, at least in my practice, women often present late. I remember one of my patients, most recent patient I got diagnosed with ovarian cancer. She had a really severe abdominal swelling, and she just thought it was just part of menopause. That, well, she was getting increased abdominal circumference, like all women do, the apple appearance. And I think it was one other minor symptom that she had that she came to me for, And I thought, you know what, there's something not quite right of this with this
Mm,
abdomen. And that was how we got her tested. And like I said, ovarian cancer is such a it's a horrible, horrible illness, and women, and that's where I find it's really worrying sometimes that everything is just put down to menopause. There are
mm,
so many women with different symptoms that I feel sometimes needs properly to be investigated.
mm.
But most women come to me saying, "No, I think I'm going through menopause." And it takes a lot of educating to say, "Look, I agree you're going through menopause. It's useful to make sure that there isn't anything else. No doubt about it. I can still treat your menopause. Obviously, if you need some hormones, we can give you, but also there are other forms of treatment available. But second to the last question, because we're nearly rounding up now, is I'm interested to know what your thoughts are about the impact of surgical menopause. So that is women who've had their ovaries removed, and they've especially at a younger age. What is the impact on their, because you mentioned it very briefly earlier on, what's the impact on their bone health, their brain health, and their heart health? Any pick on any of
It's,
those
it's,
ones.
it's, it's adverse. Once you
Mm,
have your ovary removed in your premenopausal stage, usually in your 30s, you definitely need HRT,
mm,
estrogen, till the natural age of menopause, because the symptoms of menopause are more stark in those women. They're not just stark alone, the risk of osteoporosis increases massively. The risk of even cardiovascular health, it does. You just have to go on HRT. And
mm,
that's something there's some women that need to have it done
mm,
for one reason or the other. But maybe you've got borderline ovarian cancer, and the MDT cancer team have said it's better just to take everything out because we're not sure. Those women, after they've had a histology, if it's appropriate for them to have HRT, they need to go to an HRT. It affects
mm,
every part of your body. You definitely, even the ones that some cases that are precancerous cells, you sometimes still have to put them on HRT. In some form
mm,
of cancer, you
mm,
actually need to weigh the risk of not putting them on HRT and the risk of the cancer coming back. And
mm,
if the benefit outweighs the risk, you might try alternatives, but you might
mm,
need to put them on estrogen alone HRT. Albeit you got to send them to an MDT, a
mm,
specialized HRT clinic with the lowest dose of HRT. For
mm,
instance, if somebody has cervical cancer, definitely cervical cancer, vagina cancer, definitely you need to put them on HRT. But cancer of the ovaries, you've got to tailor them carefully. If it's early stage, they might be
mm,
able to get away with estrogen alone, but you don't
mm.
do that on your own. You speak with the oncologist, you speak with the
The
H,
multidisciplinary team.
multidisciplinary team, the HR menopause specialist team before you put them on it. So it's very essential.
Mm,
Anyone who's less than 51, if they have to be sterilized, so and you have to have your ovaries taken out,
mm.
definitely put them on HRT at least until the age of menopause.
That's interesting. Well, women out there, you've heard from the experienced gynecologist. We are all here for you, but it's also important to ask questions. There are some things that, yes, women naturally don't just like the idea of hormones being put in their body, but certain times you may have to look at what the evidence is, what the advantages and disadvantages, and hopefully you have a caring doctor who will listen to your concerns, who will give you space to, ask your questions, and hopefully you can get the answers you need. Now, as we round up, thank you so much, Dr. Fumi. I really appreciate how you've broken things down very simply. And I do hope that if there are any questions, you'll be able to answer it for us. But I want you to give, if you were going to give one piece of advice to women who have had any kind of gynecological surgery, what would that be?
Um, I would, I would say it's a very good question. You've already had surgery. I would say if you're suffering from the aftermath of surgery, they see light at the end of the tunnel.
That's
Don't
it.
don't just jettison it and say there's no solution. I'm going to live my life in regret forever.
Mm,
Go and ask for help. I think people should not be scared of asking for help. I think it's a strength. to
Mm-hmm.
say, now people might not be able to cure you, but they might be able to manage your symptoms to a point where you can live with it. Most times people will be fine after surgery. If your surgery is done, the best of surgeon will still you still have complications and things like that. But
Mm-hmm.
most people will be fine at the end of the surgery. And sometimes it also takes a while for people's body to heal. And
Mm-hmm.
different folks, different strokes. Some people heal
Agree.
faster, others heal slower. And
Yes.
more importantly, if you were gonna do any surgery, if you can, try and make sure it's minimally invasively done,
Mm-hmm.
like laparoscopic surgery. It will not be possible in a lot of cases, in some cases, but more often than not, it's possible to do through keyhole surgery because your recovery time, your bleeding, your complications are just better. They just far, far better. So there's light at the end of the tunnel. Don't give up. Get an advocate. If you speak to a doctor, you're not happy, seek for opinion from someone else. Get empowered. It's your
Mm-hmm.
body. Right.
Mm, amazing stuff. And that's where I would like to end it today. Get empowered. It is your body. I think that is such a big truth. And another word I would add is menopause is never the end. It's actually the beginning. I feel it's a very interesting stage where women need to come alive and begin to face other, in a strong way, the other aspects of life, perhaps that they've even ignored for a long time. So definitely get empowered. It's your body. Use your voice. Advocate for yourself. Advocate for others. Thank you so much, Dr. Banko Dushaga. I'm so
Thanks for having me.
grateful
Yeah.
for your time. Thank you so much. I'm really definitely appreciative of the time you've taken to just explain some of these things so nicely to us. If any of our viewers wish to get in touch with you, is there any way you would like them to get in touch with you personally or through your social media handles, which I'll be happy to share?
So I've got a social media handle, Instagram. You can get in touch with me on Instagram. I do give a lot of talks on Instagram. I do advise patients. I think it's Banko do Sugar, Fumi Banko do Sugar. So feel free to send me a Instagram message, and I would normally often reply. More often than not, I would reply.
Amazing stuff. Thank you so much.
You're
Now,
welcome. Yeah.
well done. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast today. How do you keep well? Well, if you have liked this episode, if you have enjoyed listening to us today, well, look out for some more because I'm bringing in a number of different specialists to guide us, to educate us, to empower us. Why don't you share this up? Why don't you share, like, or subscribe to this podcast and to the YouTube channel? Thank you so much for listening. Have a good evening. Bye
Thanks for
bye
having me.
bye. Thank you
Bye.
so much.
Bye.
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 Excellent. Thank you.